One moment he was building a sandcastle, and the next, an 8-year-old boy vanished so silently it was as if the ocean swallowed him whole without leaving a trace. Before we get into today's cold case, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. It's always incredible to see how far these unsolved stories reach. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, because tomorrow we're opening another file. One that's been gathering dust for decades. And trust me, you won't want to miss what we found. The morning of June 14th, 2007 rose warm and bright over the Florida coastline. The kind of summer morning that felt harmless. Air thick with salt, palm trees shifting in a slow, easy wind, neighbors already mowing lawns or hosing off driveways, as if the day promised nothing more than ordinary routines. In a small yellow, one-story house at the edge of Cocoa Beach, 8-year-old Liam Carter shuffled sleepily into the kitchen, feet dragging, hair sticking in odd directions. His mother, Dana, stood barefoot at the counter, packing snacks into a cooler that had seen better days. She looked tired, permanently tired, the kind that settles into a single mother's bones. But when Liam wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, she smiled. "Beach day?" he asked, voice hopeful. She had bills to pay, laundry piled high, and an overdue work call she still hadn't returned. But she looked down at her son's wide brown eyes, and for once she let herself say yes. Emily, Liam's 14-year-old sister, eventually emerged from her room, complaining loudly about the heat, the sand, the crowds, the noise. But she slid into the back seat anyway, earbuds in, pretending not to listen to Liam excitedly narrating every detail of the sandcastle he planned to build. The drive took just under 20 minutes. By the time they reached Cocoa Cove Beach, the parking lot was already buzzing with families unloading towels, coolers, neon-colored buckets. The air smelled like sun-warmed asphalt and vanilla sunscreen. Waves rolled in soft and steady, like the ocean was breathing slowly. Dana found a spot near the water, close enough to watch Liam, far enough from the crowds. Emily wandered off toward the boardwalk for ice cream, promising she'd be right back. And Liam, full of energy, dropped to his knees in the wet sand and pierced it with his blue plastic shovel. For the first 20 minutes, everything felt perfect, normal, safe. Liam dug trenches, packed sand into towers, patted down walls with careful precision. He hummed softly under his breath, sometimes glancing back at his mother. Every time she smiled and waved, he grinned and returned to building. But just down the shoreline, someone else watched too. A man wearing a floppy blue fishing hat stood ankle-deep in the water, arms stiff at his sides. He wasn't swimming. He wasn't sunbathing. He wasn't with family. He just stood there, letting the small waves break around. His legs, eyes drifting between the ocean and the children on the sand. A woman sitting nearby noticed him first. She later told police she felt a prickling under her skin when she realized he wasn't actually watching the water. He was watching the kids, watching Liam in particular. At 2:41 p.m., another beachgoer saw a small figure, Liam, talking to someone near the water's edge. She assumed it was his mother, or maybe his older sister. She didn't realize until later that the silhouette standing beside him wasn't a teenager. It was tall, broad, wearing a hat. Around 3:05 p.m., Liam carried a handful of shells toward the dunes, laughing as he showed them to a little girl who'd been collecting sea glass. The girl later told investigators she saw Liam looking toward the pier, shading his eyes, like he was trying to see someone waving at him. At 3:12 p.m., Emily returned with 2 melting cones of ice cream, grumbling about the prices. Dana took one, still squinting into the sun. Liam was kneeling in the sand, shaping the top of a tower. At 3:14, she looked down at her phone for a weather update. At 3:17, she looked back toward the sandcastle, and her son was gone. At first, she didn't panic. She called his name lightly, scanning the shoreline. Maybe he ran to show Emily a new shell. Maybe he'd wandered toward the waves. Maybe he'd crouched behind his sandcastle wall. But the castle sat untouched, the little blue shovel stuck upright in the sand, like a marker left behind on purpose. Her chest tightened. She called louder. Emily joined in. A man nearby stood to help, pointing toward the pier. Within minutes, the beach erupted into frantic motion. Mothers pulling their kids closer. Lifeguards sprinting along the shoreline. Volunteers sweeping the dunes in wide, desperate arcs. But there were no screams, no splashing, no struggling footprints, no signs of a child dragged or carried away. Only Liam's small prints, ending halfway to the waterline. As if he stepped into nothing, as if someone erased him. That was the moment the ocean went silent. The moment the air thickened with dread so sudden and heavy that Dana Carter felt her knees weaken beneath her. Because in her gut, she understood something instantly, instinctively, something investigators wouldn't accept for years. Her son didn't drown. Someone took him. Dana's voice cracked as she shouted Liam's name again, louder this time, her eyes scanning the crowd in sharp, frantic sweeps. People started turning, watching her, watching the panic ripple through the air like a shock wave. A lifeguard jogged over, whistle swinging at his chest, asking what happened. Dana pointed at the empty patch of sand. He was right here. He was right here just 3 minutes ago. The lifeguard looked down at the sandcastle, then at the shovel stuck upright, as if frozen mid-play. He frowned. In training, they were taught that drownings were fast and quiet, but they were never invisible. A child doesn't just disappear without sound, without movement, without leaving something behind. Shoes, clothes, a scream, a splash. He blew his whistle anyway, the sharp sound cutting through the thick afternoon heat. Other lifeguards sprinted over. Beachgoers stood, shading their eyes with their hands. Children were pulled closer to towels. Several people ran toward the water, searching the shallow waves. Others moved toward the dunes. And still, there was no sign of him. Emily ran up to her mother, face pale, her voice shaking. "Where is he? Mom, where did he go? I just saw him. He was just right here." Dana grabbed her daughter's shoulders, unable to answer. Then someone shouted from near the surf, "Is this his?" A man held up a small green wristband, one of those cheap summer camp ones, with a name and a contact number printed inside. Dana didn't have to look closely. She recognized it immediately. It was Liam's. He'd worn it all summer. But the man holding it said he found it far too close to the waterline, almost touching the rising tide. Dana took it from him with trembling hands, staring at the bright green band as if it might tell her something she missed, something she should have seen. Her fingers shook so hard she nearly dropped it. "He wouldn't take this off," she whispered. "He wouldn't. He never takes it off." A lifeguard radioed ahead, his voice tight and urgent. "Possible missing child. 8-year-old male. Last seen near Umbrella Section 5. Begin full sweep." Within minutes, the entire beach was moving. People fanned out along the coastline. Teens ran along the pier. A fisherman looked under the wooden planks, scanning the water below. The sun glared down on the sand, so bright it hurt to look at anything for too long, heat rising off the ground like steam from a kettle. But nothing, no splash, no floating object, no small body, broke the surface of the calm, endless blue. A woman in a sun hat approached Dana quietly. She hesitated before speaking. I think I saw your son talking to someone, a man, over near the shoreline, maybe 15 minutes ago. Dana's head snapped toward her. What man? He was wearing a blue fishing hat. Taller guy. I didn't think anything of it. I thought he was a family member. Other witnesses chimed in. A couple said they noticed a man moving toward the dunes. Another said they saw someone walking near the pier with a child, but couldn't tell if it was a boy or girl. A teenage lifeguard said he saw someone bending down near the Sandcastle earlier, but didn't get a good look. The descriptions didn't match perfectly, but one detail echoed again and again. The hat, blue, wide-brimmed, fishing style. Dana felt dizzy. Her heartbeat thudded so hard in her chest she thought she might faint. Emily kept pacing in fast, tight circles, gripping her hair. Police arrived within 20 minutes. Squad cars pulling up fast. Lights flashing but sirens off. Officers fanned out across the beach, speaking to witnesses, taking notes that were far too short, far too shallow for what was unfolding in front of them. Dana tried to speak, but could barely get the words out. My son, he was just here. He was right here. The officer nodded stiffly. Ma'am, we're going to search the entire area. He couldn't have gone far. But even as he said it, he didn't look convinced. Children don't evaporate. Not in the middle of a crowded beach. Not without a sound. By 4:10 p.m., search boats patrolled the water. By 4:30, officers combed the dunes with dogs. By 5:15, the sun began to lower, and shadows stretched long across the sand. Still nothing. At 6:03 p.m., Dana's voice broke for the first time all day. She collapsed onto her knees beside the sandcastle, running her fingers along the edge of the wall Liam had built just hours before. The sand crumbled under her touch, soft and fragile and temporary, like everything else. Emily dropped down beside her, arms wrapped around her mother's shoulders, the wind from the ocean blowing their hair in long, tangled strands. A detective approached softly, his shoes crunching on the sand. He knelt beside them. Mrs. Carter, would you be willing to give a full statement? We're not giving up, but we need every detail. Dana lifted her face, streaked with tears and sunburn. But you don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. Someone took him. And for the first time that day, the detective didn't argue. Behind them, the ocean breathed in and out, slow and indifferent, carrying the faint cries of seagulls and the last fragments of sunlight. But the boy it had witnessed that afternoon was nowhere to be found. Not in the water, not in the dunes, not on the pier, not anywhere. As the final sweep began, one of the officers returned holding an object in his gloved hand, a wide-brimmed blue fishing hat, damp and covered in sand. It had washed up near the pier. No one on the beach claimed it. No one had seen who dropped it. And the man who might have worn it was already gone. As the blue fishing hat lay in the sand, the late afternoon wind flipped its brim slightly, revealing a faint darkened sweat ring inside. It was old, well-worn, sun-faded, stitched with a fraying logo so washed out that even the detectives struggled to read it. One of them turned it over in his hand, scanning the sand for footprints that would explain how it arrived here. But the tide had already erased everything. By 6:30 p.m., the beach looked different, not just emptier, but darker, as though the day itself had recoiled from what had happened. The sun dipped behind the horizon, casting an orange glow over the sea that made it hard not to imagine a silhouette walking away with a child in their arms. The first official search ended at 8:12 p.m., when darkness made it too dangerous to continue combing the dunes. Officers set up portable lights, illuminating the sandcastle Liam had left behind. It stood there, uneven and broken now from frantic searching. The blue shovel lay on its side. The wristband lay beside it. Evidence, they called it. But to Dana, they were pieces of her son, left behind when everything else was taken. She refused to leave. Emily refused to leave. They sat under the harsh artificial lights until well after midnight, surrounded by empty sand and the low hum of generators powering search equipment. At 1:23 a.m., a detective walked over, slow and cautious. "Mrs. Carter, we need to continue the search in the morning. The Marine unit will be back at sunrise. We've issued an amber alert. Every nearby jurisdiction has been notified." Dana stared at him blankly. "You think he walked off?" she whispered. "My son didn't walk off." The detective hesitated, looking down. "No," he said softly. "I don't." That night, the beach was cleared, sealed off with tape. Patrol officers remained parked along the boardwalk. The ocean continued to move, waves folding over each other, indifferent to the fear, the searchlights, the shouting. But somewhere in that wide, silent space, a truth lingered like a shadow no one could reach. The next morning, by 6:02 a.m., the beach was crowded again, but this time with law enforcement. Boats glided across the water. Drones buzzed in the hazy dawn light. A helicopter swept low over the surf, blades chopping the humid air. K-9 units patrolled the dunes, noses pressed into sand, still cool from the night. Detectives interviewed everyone who had been on the beach the day before. Most saw nothing unusual. A few mentioned the hat. One teenage girl claimed she saw a man walk toward the pier, holding a towel, big enough to hide something. But none of them could describe his face. No one remembered seeing him leave. The tide schedule from that day showed something eerie. At the exact time Liam disappeared, the water had reached its lowest pull before rising again. A moment of stillness. A moment of opportunity. Detective Mark Ellery, assigned as lead on the case, paced the shoreline. He was a 20-year veteran, calm and methodical, but something about this case unsettled him deeply. Children who drowned always resurfaced. Children who wandered off left trails. Children who were taken left witnesses. But this boy left nothing. He examined the hat again, its brim stiffened by dried sea salt. Inside, a faint scent of sunscreen mixed with something else. Sweat. Skin. Whoever wore it had worn it often. He bagged it carefully and sent it off for testing. Meanwhile, far up the beach, Dana Carter sat wrapped in a gray blanket provided by officers. Emily sat beside her, knees pulled to her chest, staring straight ahead, eyes swollen from crying. None of the usual explanations offered comfort. Maybe he was playing hide and seek. Maybe he ran after a bird. Maybe he followed another child. She rejected every possibility. "No," she said, her voice cracking. "He didn't run anywhere. Someone took him." Detective Ellery took her statement in full. She described the day from the moment they left the house. Her memory was sharp despite her exhaustion. She recalled each detail with painful clarity. What Liam wore, how he smiled while scooping sand, the shells he had collected. But when Ellery asked whether she'd seen any unfamiliar men on the beach, Dana paused. "I saw someone," she said slowly. "A man in a blue hat. But he wasn't close. Not close enough." Ellery scribbled the note, though it was already repeating in his mind. The hat, the hat, the hat. At 10:48 a.m., a witness approached officers, a fisherman who often worked the pier. His skin was sun-browned, his shirt frayed, his eyes tired but alert. "Are you looking for the boy?" he asked. "I might have seen something." Detectives surrounded him. The fisherman gestured toward the far end of the pier. "I was out here yesterday, around maybe 3:15. I saw a man standing under the pier in the shade. It looked like he was waiting for someone." "What did he look like?" Ellery asked. The fisherman thought for a moment. "Tall, broad shoulders, wearing a hat, blue." He kept looking toward the beach, and when the crowd suddenly started shouting, he walked away fast. "Walked where?" "Toward the parking lot." He kept his head down. It looked like he was carrying something wrapped in a towel. Ellery's heart tightened. "What kind of something?" "I don't know," the fisherman said. "Could have been anything. A cooler, a bag, a kid." Dana collapsed to her knees at the words, hands over her mouth. The fisherman grimaced, lowering his voice. "I ain't saying it was. I'm saying he was in a hurry, like he didn't want to be seen." Ellery turned toward the parking lot, stretching out in a straight line from the pier. A security camera hung near the exit. Old, rusted, the kind that barely functioned. But it was their only hope. When technicians pulled the footage, there was only one clear moment. A blurry figure walking quickly across the lot, a towel slung over his arms. His hat was blue. His face never showed. The timestamp read 3:19 p.m., 5 minutes after Liam was last seen. The footage cut out seconds later. One of the feeds failed that afternoon, the same hour Liam disappeared. Ellery replayed the clip 10 times. Each time, the towel swayed in the exact same moment the figure's arms tightened around it, as if he were carrying something heavy, something precious, something moving. And as the detective stared at the screen, a cold realization washed over him like the tide. There was no drowning. This was no accident. This was an abduction. But the man in the blue hat had vanished just as completely as the boy. And the one thing in the world that might reveal who he really was had been retrieved from the tide, with no identifying features left behind, except one faint clue investigators wouldn't notice until weeks later. Inside the hat's sweatband, invisible to the naked eye, was a single pale eyebrow hair. Not Liam's, not Dana's, not tourists', someone else's, someone who had been watching, someone who had been waiting, and someone who was going to do everything possible to never be found. The single eyebrow hair found inside the sweatband was bagged, labeled, and sent to the State Forensic Lab in Tallahassee. But in 2007, DNA technology, especially for tiny, degraded samples, was limited. Analysts warned detectives the strand might not yield anything usable. It was too thin, too pale, too weather-worn, but they tried. While the lab processed the sample, detectives widened the search radius. Roadblocks were placed along the coastal highways. Cars were stopped, drivers questioned, trunks inspected. Every van, pickup truck, and SUV in the area was flagged. Patrol boats swept the intercoastal waterway. The Coast Guard scanned miles of shoreline. For 48 hours, Florida was looking for one boy, one man, one blue hat. Meanwhile, the media descended on Cocoa Beach like a storm. News vans lined the boardwalk. Reporters spoke in urgent voices about the vanishing boy and the mystery of the Sandcastle. Camera crews zoomed in on the shovel, the wristband, the broken towers. Dana's tear-streaked face appeared on every station. She begged whoever had her son to bring him back. No questions asked, just bring him back. But whoever took Liam did not respond. 3 days have passed, then 4, then 5. Each night, the search parties thinned. Volunteers went home. Families returned to their routines. Tourists trickled back to the beach, stepping carefully around the area where the Sandcastle once stood. Only Dana and Emily remained constant fixtures. They sat at the shoreline every evening until dark, staring, waiting, listening. Detective Ellery refused to let the case grow cold. He dug through hours of witness interviews, each one containing fragments, moments, glimpses, shadows. A woman saw a man pacing near the dunes. A teenager thought she heard a child crying near the boardwalk. A surfer said he noticed a man walking quickly toward the parking lot, looking over his shoulder. But none of them could describe his face. Every description blurred together: tallish, average build, blue hat, towel or bag, moved quickly, didn't look back, like a ghost in daylight. On the 6th day, the lab called with results. They had an answer, but not the one Ellery hoped for. The hair was human, male, but the DNA profile was incomplete, too degraded to enter CODIS. It produced only a partial sequence, useless by itself. No match, no identity, no lead. The one physical clue linking the kidnapper to the scene had turned into a dead end. That night, Ellery sat alone in his office, long after the other detectives had gone home. He stared at the beach map pinned to the corkboard. Red lines traced search routes. Blue circles marked witness points. A single yellow pin marked the Sandcastle. A second pin, black, marked the spot where Liam's footprints ended. The prints didn't lead into the water. They didn't lead to the dunes. They didn't lead anywhere. They simply ended, as if someone had lifted him, carried him, removed him from the world in silence. Ellery rubbed his tired eyes. He wanted to run the timeline again, wanted to question every witness again, wanted to tear apart the parking lot camera to salvage one more frame. Instead, he opened his recorder, pressed the red button, and documented his thoughts. No struggle, no scream, no drag marks, no personal items scattered. The child seems to disappear between 3:14 and 3:17 p.m. Evidence suggests abduction by an unknown male wearing a blue hat. Parking lot footage shows a suspect carrying a towel-wrapped object consistent with a child. Case status: active abduction, suspect unidentified, danger level high. He slowed, then added quietly, if the suspect planned this, he knew exactly when to move. Meanwhile, miles away, Dana sat at Liam's desk in his untouched bedroom. His drawings were pinned to the wall. Crayon doodles of rockets, dinosaurs, sandy castles, and scribbles that didn't quite form shapes. His baseball glove lay on the shelf. His favorite stuffed turtle rested on his pillow. She picked it up, holding it to her chest. "I know you're out there," she whispered into the quiet room. "I know you're alive. I can feel it. I can feel you." But 11 days after Liam vanished, a new development shook the investigation. A man was found trespassing behind a beachside resort, shirtless, sunburned, mumbling incoherently, looking disoriented. Security detained him and called police. When officers arrived, they noticed something strange. The man was carrying a blue waterproof pouch. Inside were several items: 2 fishing lures, a cheap motel key, a faded grocery receipt, and a crumpled photograph. A photograph of a young boy building a sandcastle. The boy looked exactly like Liam. Detective Ellery rushed to the resort. The man, sunburned, dehydrated, barely coherent, insisted he found the photo on the beach and thought it was trash. Officers questioned him intensely, but his answers were disjointed and inconsistent. He said he had been drinking, said he had slept under the pier, said he didn't know anything about a missing child. Still, when Ellery held the photo, something in his gut twisted sharply. The picture wasn't taken days ago. It wasn't old. It wasn't faded from years of exposure. It looked like it had been printed recently, very recently. It captured Liam from the side, his head bent as he worked on the sandcastle. The angle was low, as if someone had knelt or crouched behind a dune. The timestamp on the image file, retrieved from the photo's faint digital border, read 06-14-07, 3:11 p.m., 3 minutes before he vanished. Someone took this photo of the boy moments before he was abducted. Someone close enough to reach out and touch him, and that someone was still out there, watching, hiding, collecting trophies. As Ellery stared at the photo, one question consumed him. Why would the abductor take a picture? And why would that picture end up here? Accident? Discarded? Or left on purpose? A message? Dana cried uncontrollably when she saw it. Emily shut down completely, retreating into a silence she wouldn't break for months. And the investigation, already frantic, descended into a new phase. Because now they weren't just searching for a missing boy. They were hunting a predator who had planned this, watched him, followed him, photographed him, and took him, and somewhere, that man and that child were still out there. Detective Ellery stared at the photograph long after the resort trespasser had been escorted away. The image trembled slightly between his fingers, not because of the wind, but because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The angle, the proximity, the timing. This wasn't an opportunistic stranger snapping a random picture. This was surveillance, preparation, intent. Someone watched Liam long enough to capture the moment before taking him. There was no more doubt, no more uncertainty. This was premeditated. Ellery sealed the photo into an evidence sleeve and drove straight to the station, the wheels skidding slightly on wet asphalt as a light drizzle began tapping against the windshield. Summer rain, thin, warm, and fast, blurred the world outside as he pulled into the lot. Inside the precinct, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside his mind. He placed the photo on the briefing table where officers had gathered, some sipping burnt coffee, others leaning forward with tension etched into their brows. Ellery pointed at the timestamp. 3 minutes, he said quietly. The abductor took this 3 minutes before Liam vanished. Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone swore under their breath. "Sir," a young officer said, "if the suspect got that close, someone should have seen him." Ellery nodded slowly. They did. They just didn't know what they were seeing. He placed a second item next to the photo. The blue fishing hat, now dry and carefully preserved. "This hat," he continued, "was found near the pier. If the same person wore it, he could have been standing within 20 feet of Liam, watching, waiting for the right moment." Another officer, Morales, frowned deeply. Why would he drop the hat? Why leave it behind? That question had gnawed at Ellery, too. He took a long breath. "Maybe he didn't drop it," he said. "Maybe he threw it." The room fell silent. "Why?" Morales asked. "To mislead us," Ellery replied. to make us think he fled toward the pier, but the photo wasn't found near the pier. It was found near the resort, on the opposite side. So he wanted us to look the wrong way. Exactly. A calculated hunter, a planner, a predator who understood confusion, could buy him precious minutes. And he got them, enough to vanish. The next step was obvious, painful, and terrifying. They needed to expand the timeline, go further back. Not just the minutes before the disappearance, but weeks before, possibly months. Someone doesn't just wake up one day and decide to abduct a child from a crowded beach. They watch, they study, they wait for opportunity. So Ellery pulled Liam's mother and sister in for more in-depth interviews. Dana sat in the stale gray interview room, knuckles white as she clutched the stuffed turtle she'd brought from home. Emily sat beside her, silent, eyes red and distant. "Mrs. Carter," Ellery said gently, "I need to ask something difficult. Have you noticed anyone around your home recently? Anyone watching your family? Any strange encounters?" Dana shook her head at first, then stopped. Her breath caught. "There was a man," she whispered. Ellery leaned forward. "What man?" I don't know if it's anything," she stammered. "But a few times in the last month, when I dropped Liam off at school, there was this car, a white sedan, parked across the street. Same spot, same time." "Did you see the driver?" "No, the windows were tinted." "Did it follow you?" "No, it always stayed parked. But every time I looked in that direction, I felt watched." Emily spoke for the first time in hours. "Mom, the man at the grocery store." Dana froze. "What man?" Ellery asked, turning to Emily. She hesitated, pulling her sleeves over her hands. "There was a guy at Publix, about a week before the beach. He bumped into Liam near the cereal aisle. When Liam apologized, the man just stared at him, smiling. Not a nice smile, like he was interested." Dana closed her eyes, guilt washing over her face like a breaking wave. "I told myself I was overreacting," she whispered. "Every mother gets paranoid sometimes. I thought I was imagining it." Ellery didn't blame her. Predators count on being forgettable, on being dismissed, on blending into the places parents consider safe. But one detail stood out sharply. "What did he look like?" he asked Emily. She swallowed. "Tall, white, average build, grayish beard, and—" she paused. "And he wore a blue hat." The room fell cold. Ellery's pen froze in his hand. "The same hat?" he asked. Emily nodded. "I think so." Dana covered her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, he was following us." Ellery stood abruptly, heart pounding. This wasn't a random beach abduction. This wasn't a moment of opportunity. This was stalking, planned, organized, deliberate. This man had watched Liam before, approached him before, followed him before. And the beach, crowded, chaotic, loud, gave him the perfect cover. Ellery called an emergency task force meeting that same hour. Officers scrambled, pulling surveillance footage from grocery stores, school parking lots, gas stations, nearby intersections, anywhere a white sedan with tinted windows might have been recorded. Every hour of footage was examined, every license plate scanned, every suspicious male identified, but nothing matched. Nothing showed a man in a blue hat. Nothing linked to Liam. It was as if the suspect existed only in the moments he wanted to be seen. By the end of the 2-week mark, community pressure reached a breaking point. Press conferences grew heated. Reporters cornered officers. Rumors flooded the internet. Some believed Liam had wandered off. Others insisted he drowned. Most accused the police of failing the family. A few even accused Donna, always the mother. Ellery shielded her from the worst of it. But he couldn't shield her from the nights. Nights where every creak, every car door, every shifting shadow made her freeze. Nights where Emily woke screaming. Nights where the ocean felt like a living thing that had swallowed her child. But on the 15th day, something happened. A retired couple walking near Satellite Beach, about 40 minutes south, found a plastic bottle washed under the sand. Inside was a rolled-up scrap of paper. They broke the bottle open, expecting a joke or a tourist note. Instead, they found a message scrawled in shaky handwriting. "I am alive." No name, no signature, no date, just 3 words. Police rushed the note into evidence. Forensic analysis began immediately. But what chilled Detective Ellery wasn't the handwriting, or the bottle, or the message itself. It was the ocean tide chart from 2 nights prior. At 3:17 a.m., the same minute Liam vanished 2 weeks earlier, the current had shifted north to south, meaning the bottle didn't float north toward Satellite Beach. Someone placed it there. Someone who wanted them to find it. Someone who wanted them to know. The game was still ongoing. The handwriting analysis began before the bottle had even dried completely. The note, 3 words written in graphite, was placed under magnification. Analysts looked for pressure points, stroke direction, graphite density, anything that could reveal whether an 8-year-old child actually wrote it. 30 minutes in, the lead examiner called Detective Ellery into the lab. He pointed to the first letter. This wasn't written by a child. Ellery felt his stomach drop. The pressure is too heavy, too controlled, the examiner continued. Children Liam's age don't write with this kind of muscle memory. Their letters vary in size, slope, weight. This writing is precise, consistent, adult. So someone forged the message, Ellery said quietly, or someone forced it. Ellery closed his eyes. If the kidnapper was trying to communicate, he wasn't trying to reassure them. He was taunting them. A predator leaving breadcrumbs not to help, but to control. Outside the lab, rain started again. Another Florida afternoon shower, brief and scattered. Drops streaked the windows as if the sky itself were exhausted by the case. As the message was documented and catalogued, another officer entered with a grim update. No fingerprints on the bottle, no usable prints on the note, no environmental trace that could place it anywhere specific. It was clean, too clean. Ellery stared at the small slip of paper inside its evidence bag. I am alive. 3 words that carried more weight than anything else in the case. Was Liam alive? Was the kidnapper lying? Was this bait to pull investigators in a particular direction? He didn't know. That uncertainty was its own kind of torture. That evening, Ellery visited Dana at her home. She sat at the kitchen table, a cup of untouched tea in front of her, the room dimly lit. Emily sat in the living room, curled up under a blanket, watching the same cartoon loop over and over, just for noise. When Ellery handed Dana the photo of the message, she pressed it against her chest, clutching it so hard the plastic sleeve bent. Is it him? She asked, voice trembling. We don't know yet. But the words, he's telling me he's alive. He's telling me. Dana, Ellery said softly, it may not have been written by a child. Her eyes widened with fresh terror. Then who wrote it? A man trying to manipulate the investigation. Dana shook her head violently. No, he's alive. I know he's alive. I would feel it if he wasn't. Ellery didn't argue. He couldn't bring himself to. Back at the station, a pattern began to form. Subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. The man stalking Liam had patience. He had opportunity. He had planned. Now, he wanted control. And the next clue came from someone no one expected. A quiet, middle-aged man named Richard Lane, who walked into the station 2 days after the bottle was found. He kept wringing his hands as he stood at the front desk. I think I saw that boy," he said finally. "The missing one." Ellery was notified immediately. He brought Lane into an interview room. "Tell me everything," Ellery urged. Lane swallowed, sweat beading along his hairline. "I walk my dog every night down near the boardwalk. A couple nights ago, must have been around 2 a.m., I saw a boy standing near the dunes." Ellery leaned forward sharply. "A boy? Alone? That's what startled me. Kids that age don't wander alone at night. I thought maybe he was sleepwalking. But when I got closer, I swear to God, Detective, he looked just like the boy on the news." "What did he do? Did he speak?" Lane shook his head. "He was still. Too still. Staring at the ocean." "Did you approach him?" "No, I froze. Something about the whole scene felt wrong. And then," he wiped his palms on his jeans, "I saw a man in the shadows behind him." Ellery's pulse kicked hard. What did the man do? Nothing. He just stood there, watching the boy, watching me. And when my dog barked, he stepped back into the trees and disappeared. "Did the boy follow him?" Lane hesitated. "He didn't move. Not at all. Like he was waiting." "For the man?" "I don't know," Lane whispered. "It gave me chills." "Why didn't you call it in that night?" Because the boy vanished when I looked away," Lane said, voice cracking. "Just gone. Like he wasn't there at all." Ellery rubbed a shaking hand across his face. A boy who resembled Liam, a man in the shadows, both gone in an instant. But Lane insisted he wasn't dreaming. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't mistaken. "I know what I saw," he whispered. "And that boy, he needed help." Ellery ordered a forensic sweep of the boardwalk area immediately. K-9 units searched the dunes for hours. Boot prints were found. Some small, some large, nothing conclusive. But the most disturbing find came near a cluster of sea oats, half buried in soft sand. A small plastic green bead. A bead identical to the ones woven into Liam's beach wristband. The one that had been found on the shoreline the day he vanished. Ellery held it in his hand, heart pounding. This wasn't drift. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't old debris. It was fresh, untarnished, unfaded. Someone had been here, recently. The strongest theory became undeniable. The kidnapper wasn't hiding far away. He was staying close, watching the investigation, studying the reaction, circling the same beaches, the same boardwalks, the same dunes, the bottle message, the boardwalk sighting, the bead. He wasn't just hunting, he was haunting. By the 21st day, the case had taken a turn that chilled every officer involved. This wasn't a disappearance frozen in time. It was still unfolding, piece by piece. And somewhere, close enough to watch, close enough to reach, close enough to return, a man in a blue hat was waiting for his next move. Detective Ellery didn't sleep that night. Not really. He lay on his couch in the precinct's break room with the lights off, but his mind never stopped moving. The green bead, the boardwalk sighting, the man in the shadows, the bottle, the photo. Every clue pointed to one terrifying fact. The kidnapper hadn't left the area. He was still here. Somewhere between the dunes, the motels, the boardwalk, the tourist shops. Somewhere close enough to slip into the night, place a bead in the sand, watch a young man walk his dog, and retreat again without a sound. At 4:17 a.m., Ellery sat up suddenly, heart pounding. Something had clicked in his head. Not a solution, but a direction. A thread. Predators who revisit. Their crime scenes typically do so for one of two reasons: to relive the event, or to prepare for another. If the man in the blue hat was comfortable enough to approach the boardwalk again, he might return to the beach as well. So when the sun rose at 6:11 a.m., Ellery and two officers were already stationed near the dunes. They blended in with early joggers and fishermen, wearing casual clothes. The air smelled of salt and seaweed, the sand cool from the night's breeze. Few people were out at that hour, but those who were looked harmless. Retirees, surfers waiting for decent waves, a couple walking their dog. No one in a blue hat, no one suspicious. Nothing. By 8 a.m., the sun grew harsh, and the first families began arriving. Children ran toward the water with inflatable tubes. Parents unloaded coolers. Lifeguards took their seats. Another normal day. Another reminder that life continued without answers. But then, at 8:37 a.m., Officer Morales, stationed near the pier, radioed through with a sharp, tense whisper. "Detective, you're going to want to see this." Ellery broke into a fast walk, heart thudding. Morales waved him over near the pier's support beams, pointing at something half buried in wet sand. A footprint. Small, bare, child-sized. Ellery knelt, touching the sand gently. The print was fresh, edges crisp, not softened by wind. The tide hadn't touched it yet. Around it, scattered bits of seaweed lay undisturbed. Morales swallowed. "Sir, look next to it." 2 inches away was another footprint. Larger, much larger, adult, male, positioned at an angle, as if standing directly beside the child. Ellery's pulse surged. This wasn't from yesterday. It wasn't from last week. This was from hours ago. "The tide was high overnight," Morales said quietly. "These prints, they were made after sunrise." Ellery stood slowly, eyes scanning the dunes, the boardwalk, the parking lot, every face in the early crowd. He could feel it. A presence, a weight in the air. The man was here, this morning, watching, testing their response. A predator circling back to the scene of his crime. An officer approached at a jog, holding something in a gloved hand. "Detective, we found this near the waterline." Ellery knew what it was before it was even placed in his palm. A child's seashell. Pink, slightly chipped, smooth from being handled over and over. Dana had told him Liam collected shells obsessively, kept them in his pockets, brought them home, lined them on his windowsill. This one matched the kind found in his room. Ellery closed his fist around it. Not too hard, just enough to steady himself. This wasn't lost. This was placed. A message, a breadcrumb, a signal. But why? To torment the family? To play with police? To show he was always one step ahead? Or was Liam trying to leave clues? The thought tightened Ellery's chest. If the child was alive? If he was being moved around? If he had moments of freedom, brief, terrifying moments, he might be trying to help. Ellery ordered the crew to photograph the prints, bag the seashell, and sweep the area for any other trace. Forensics combed every inch within a 20-yard radius. And that was when another officer called out from near the dunes. "Sir, over here!" Ellery sprinted over. In the sand was a small indentation, circular, shallow, faint but unmistakable. a child's knee print. Next to it, 2 small handprints, as if a child had crouched down, or been forced to. The scene hit Ellery hard, too hard. He knelt beside the prints, his shadow falling over them like a curtain. "What were you doing here, kid?" he whispered. "Why were you kneeling?" The forensics techs worked quietly, their camera shutters clicking like distant metronomes. A few early beachgoers watched from afar, unaware of the gravity of what they were seeing. But then, another detail emerged. Just beyond the handprints, caught on a tuft of seagrass, was a thread. A single thread, bright, red. Ellery's breath hitched. Dana had told him Liam's swim trunks were blue, with tiny red stitching down the sides. The thread matched. He bagged it immediately, heart hammering so hard it hurt. The kid was still alive. He had to be. He had to be close. But as officers expanded the search perimeter, another chilling realization came into focus. No drag marks, no running tracks, no signs of a struggle. Liam hadn't been chased, or dragged, or carried forcibly. The kneeling position, the handprints. He had stopped willingly, or been told to. "Detective," one of the younger officers called. "We found tire tracks behind the dunes." Ellery followed, weaving through the tall grass until he reached a patch of sand imprinted with deep, fresh tire marks, parallel, clean, heading out toward a back access road rarely used by tourists. An escape route. The tracks were wide, like from an older model SUV or a van. "Did we get any vehicle reports?" Ellery asked. "Nothing yet," the officer replied. "But, sir, there's something else. One more set of footprints. Adult, heavy, large, and leading directly to the driver's side of the vehicle." Ellery stared at them, these silent signatures of a man who had slipped in and out of their grasp with terrifying ease. The kidnapper knew this area. He knew how to avoid cameras. He knew the tides. He knew the terrain. And he was bold enough to return during daylight. That meant confidence. It meant familiarity. It meant he felt untouchable. Ellery swallowed the rising dread. "He's escalating," he said quietly. "Why?" Morales asked. "Because he wants attention," Ellery replied. "He wants control. He wants us to know he's still here." He turned back to the kneeling prince, the seashell, the red thread. "And he wants us to know the boy is still alive." When the footprint casts were finished and the shell sealed, Ellery walked toward the shoreline alone. The waves crawled up the sand, erased, withdrew, returned. Over and over, restless. The ocean held secrets. But so did the man hiding in plain sight. Ellery stared at the horizon. "You came back today," he whispered. "Will you come back again?" Behind him, unseen from the beach, a figure stood on the boardwalk in a hooded sweatshirt, blending into the morning crowd. His posture relaxed, his hands in his pockets, watching the investigation, watching the detectives, watching the unearthed clues, watching the man who hunted him. And under the hood, his mouth curled into the faintest smile. The figure on the boardwalk stayed only a few minutes, long enough to watch officers cast the footprints, long enough to see Ellery pick up the red thread, long enough to confirm that the investigation was following exactly the path he intended. Then, as a family with small children approached, he turned away, blending into the slow-moving crowd as easily as a drop of water disappearing into the tide. No one noticed him leave. No one remembered seeing him arrive. He was just another shape, another shadow, another man in a world full of men. By the time Ellery finally left the beach around noon, the day had grown unbearably hot. Sweat soaked through his collar, Sand clung to his shoes, and exhaustion pulled at his face like invisible hands. He sat inside his unmarked car with the engine off, letting the silence settle before turning the key. He didn't want to disturb the quiet. For a moment, it felt like the only place the truth could breathe. But his phone vibrated, shattering the stillness. Unknown number. He answered immediately. A voice, male, calm, unhurried, filled the car. "You're getting warmer." Ellery froze, his fingers tightening around the phone until his knuckles whitened. "Who is this?" he demanded. The voice ignored him. "The shells, the footprints, the thread. Good work, detective. Truly." Ellery's pulse thundered against his ribs. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not like this. "What do you want?" he said, keeping his voice low. A soft chuckle drifted through the speaker, a smile in sound. "Want? I already have what I want." Ellery swallowed hard. "Where is the boy?" A pause, a thoughtful hum. "He's alive," the voice said. "You needed proof. I gave it to you." The seashell, the prints, the bead. "You son of a—" Ellery began, but the voice cut him off, amused. "But detective, you're still not asking the right question." "What question?" Ellery hissed. Another pause, a long, quiet inhale. "Why today?" Ellery's breath caught. "What do you mean?" But the line went dead. Ellery sat staring at the phone, a coldness spreading through him that had nothing to do with air conditioning. He tried to trace the number. Blocked. Spoofed. The call would lead nowhere in time. He dialed dispatch immediately. "Lock down all exits from Cocoa Beach. Notify local hotels. Secure the boardwalk. He's watching us." Officers mobilized within minutes. But the man, whoever he was already gone. Across town, in a rundown motel with peeling turquoise paint and a broken neon sign that flickered in the daylight, Room 23 smelled faintly of mildew, sunscreen, and stale cigarette smoke. The curtains were drawn. The bed was unmade. A TV on mute played a static-filled infomercial. And lying on top of the dresser was something small, something soft, something devastating. A child's drawing, crayons on notebook paper, a house, a sun, a stick figure boy holding a blue shovel, smiling. The handwriting beneath it was uneven, shaky, frightened. "Mommy." In the corner of the room, the man in the hooded sweatshirt sat on a chair, elbows resting on his knees. He studied the drawing as if it were a masterpiece. Then slowly, he folded it and tucked it into his pocket. He stood and crossed the room, pausing at a closet door. With a quiet exhale, he opened it gently. Inside, the small body of an 8-year-old boy sat on the floor, knees pulled to his chest, eyes wide and red from crying. His wrists weren't bound, but he was too terrified to run, too conditioned now, too afraid of what happened the last time he tried. The boy looked up. "Please," he whispered, "I want to go home." The man crouched beside him, one hand resting lightly on the closet doorframe. "You will," he said softly. "Just not yet." Tears spilled down the child's cheeks. The man brushed a strand of hair off the boy's forehead in a gesture that should have been comforting, but wasn't. "They're close," he murmured. "Closer than they've ever been. And we need to give them something new today, don't we?" The boy didn't answer. He stared at the floor, shoulders trembling. The man smiled gently. "Good. That's what I thought." He stood, grabbed a small canvas bag from beside the bed, and slipped a folded towel inside. Then he glanced around the dim motel room, eyes scanning each surface, each object. He moved with purpose, with habit, with a chilling ease that suggested he had done this before. When he was satisfied, everything was perfect. Every trace hidden, every clue intentional. He opened the closet slightly wider. "I'll be back soon," he said. "Stay quiet. Stay still." He closed the door. The boy held his breath in the dark until he heard the click of the motel lock. Then he cried silently into his knees. A few miles away, Ellery arrived back at the station, anger simmering beneath his skin. He slammed his office door, grabbed the whiteboard marker, and wrote 3 words the caller had emphasized. "Why today?" He stared at them. Then something strange happened. He felt a shift, small, subtle, but profound. A thread tightening. A connection emerging in the chaos. The predator didn't speak randomly. He didn't leave clues randomly. He didn't call randomly. Everything had meaning. Ellery checked the date. 22 days since the disappearance. But the date meant nothing. He checked the tide chart. Nothing significant. He checked the caller's phrase again. "Why today?" Then he froze. A chill crawled down his spine. Today was Wednesday. The same day of the week Liam vanished. Ellery grabbed the map, throwing it across the table, unfolding it in one sweep. He traced the areas hit that morning, the dunes, the shoreline, the pier. And then it struck him. Today wasn't an anniversary of the day. It was a reenactment of the day. The predator was recreating the timeline, piece by piece, moment by moment, testing how quickly the police responded, testing how they moved, testing where they searched, studying them, preparing for something. Ellery's chest tightened. This wasn't just about keeping the child. This was about controlling the narrative, controlling the hunt, controlling the fear. And the predator was escalating. He had a plan. And the next move wasn't going to be subtle. Ellery backed away from the board slowly. "Oh God," he whispered. "He's about to do something bigger." Outside the station, unnoticed by everyone, a white sedan with tinted windows drove past slowly. Inside, behind the wheel, the man smiled. The white sedan rolled past the police station as smoothly as a shadow sliding across pavement. The man behind the wheel didn't look left or right. He kept his gaze fixed forward, fingers tapping the steering wheel in an idle rhythm. He knew the building, the officers, the routines. He had watched this place more times than they could imagine. He turned the corner and disappeared into traffic, the tinted windows catching a brief glint of sunlight before vanishing behind a cluster of palm trees. Back inside the station, Detective Ellery was unraveling, pacing the length of his office as if movement might spark an answer. His mind replayed the phone call on a loop, each word burrowing deeper. "You're getting warmer." You're still not asking the right question. "Why today?" He replayed the suspect's tone, calm, confident, curious even. This was not a man scared of being caught. This was a man who believed fully, deeply, that he was untouchable. Ellery stopped pacing and leaned over the table, palms pressed into the surface. "What are you planning?" he whispered. As if in answer, his phone buzzed violently. Unknown number again. His heartbeat slammed into his chest, so forcefully he felt it in his throat. He answered immediately. "You son of a—" But the voice wasn't the suspect. "Detective Ellery?" A woman, shaky, terrified. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Cynthia Blake. I work front desk at the Shoreline Motel." Ellery straightened. That name meant nothing. But her voice, she sounded on the edge of collapsing. "What's happened?" he asked gently. "There's a man in one of the rooms. Room 23. He paid in cash 2 weeks ago and he hasn't let housekeeping in. Ever. Yesterday I left fresh towels outside the door, and they were gone within minutes, but I didn't hear anyone open the door. "Ma'am," Ellery said calmly, "take a breath. Tell me what made you call." Cynthia exhaled shakily. "This morning, I was checking the exterior rooms, and when I walked past 23, she paused, collecting herself. "I heard something." "What did you hear?" "A child," she whispered. It sounded like a child crying. Every nerve in Ellery's body froze. "How sure are you?" It wasn't a TV, detective. It wasn't a recording. It was a child, a young one. Ellery grabbed his keys. "Stay inside your office. Don't go near the room. I'm on my way." He sprinted out of the building, shouting for backup. Officers scrambled immediately, sirens roaring to life, tires screeching on pavement. The adrenaline hit them all at once. This was the break. This was the moment. As patrol cars cut through midday traffic, the suspect sat in his sedan at a nearby intersection, watching the commotion in the distance, engine idling. He didn't need to follow them. He already knew where they were going. He had left the motel hours earlier. Everything that needed to be in that room was already there. Ellery arrived first. He parked crooked, barely killing the engine before jumping out. A handful of officers followed, weapons drawn but lowered, moving with controlled urgency. The Shoreline Motel was a forgotten relic, turquoise paint peeling in long strips, rusted metal railings, stained concrete walkways. A cracked sign buzzed overhead, flickering intermittently as if unsure whether it was alive or dead. Cynthia Blake met them at the office door, trembling. "It's down the walkway," she whispered, pointing. "Second floor, room 23. Ellery moved, faster than he should have, climbing the stairs 2 at a time. His breath was loud in his ears, almost drowning out everything else. The corridor smelled like mildew and stale cigarettes. A breeze rattled the loose siding. He stopped outside room 23. The door was shut, no noise from inside. Morales came up behind him. "Orders?" Ellery's voice was steel. "Breaching!" Officers took position. One stood ready with the ram. Ellery counted down. 3. His heart hammered so hard it hurt. 2. For a split second, everything went silent except for the soft hum of the motel sign. 1. The ram struck the door off its hinges. They flooded inside and stopped. The room was empty. Not empty as in vacant. Empty as in scrubbed. Sterile. Erased. The bed was perfectly made. No clothes, no toiletries, no bags, no evidence a human being had stayed longer than 5 minutes. But in the center of the room, placed neatly on the pillow, was a single object. A child's shoelace, bright blue, still tied. Then Morales spotted something else. "Sir," behind the closet door, taped at eye level, was a Polaroid. Ellery approached slowly. The photo showed the inside of the very same closet. And in it, a boy, huddled, terrified, eyes red, face pale. Liam, alive. Ellery's hands shook as he peeled the photo from the door. On the back, written in the same handwriting as the bottle note, were 3 words. "Too slow, Mark." Ellery stumbled back, his chest tightening. He could barely breathe. "He was here," he choked. "He was just here." Officers swept the room again, searching under the bed, behind the curtains, inside the bathroom. Nothing. Not a single stray hair, not a fingerprint, not a scrap of trash. The man had wiped the place clean. He'd known the exact time housekeeping passed, the exact blind spots of the cameras, the exact time police would arrive. But then Morales noticed something by the window. A faint smudge on the sill. A fingerprint? No. A small smear of grime, as if something had brushed against it on the way out. Ellery opened the window. Outside was a metal fire escape, rusty, old, dust disturbed. And at the base of the stairs, in the patch of dirt behind the motel, were footprints, child-sized, light, running. Panic surged in Ellery's chest. "He escaped," Morales breathed. "No," Ellery said quietly. The footprints stopped abruptly at the edge of the dirt, next to a larger set, then tire marks, burned into the ground from a fast exit. "He got out," Ellery whispered, but the man caught him. The motel manager stood trembling in the doorway, covering her mouth. "Oh, God, he was right here?" "Yes," Ellery said quietly. "He was here." And then, as officers continued scanning the area, one of them called out, "Detective! Over here!" Something was taped to the dumpster behind the building. A sheet of paper, weathered, gray at the edges, a drawing, crayons, a boy in a car, windows blacked out, a driver wearing a blue hat. The child had drawn the abductor. A small note scribbled in the corner shook Ellery more than anything else. "Please find me." The handwriting was definitely a child's, and the crayon marks were fresh. Liam had drawn this within the last 24 hours. Ellery closed his eyes, gripping the drawing so tightly it crumpled. "Hang on, kid," he whispered. "I'm coming." But as he said it, miles away, speeding down an empty coastal road, the man in the blue hat smiled to himself. The boy sat in the back seat, quiet and scared, hands resting on his knees. Too slow, the man thought again. Much too slow. The sedan carved through the coastal highway like a blade through dark fabric. The engine hummed low, smooth, perfectly maintained. The kind of sound a man makes when he knows he isn't being chased. Not yet. Inside, Liam sat with his knees pulled to his chest. Small hands trembling against the seat belt the man had buckled for him. The windows were tinted so dark that even daylight couldn't penetrate. Only the dashboard's faint glow lit the interior. The man glanced at Liam in the rearview mirror. "You did very well," he said softly, very quietly. "That's good." Liam didn't answer. His lips quivered. His eyes locked on the passing slivers of light outside, flashes that meant nothing anymore. No landmarks, no familiar streets, just movement. "Why?" The boy swallowed. "Why are we driving again?" The man's smile flickered in the mirror. "Because someone came early today." The words were spoken lightly, like a joke, like a reminder. "But that's okay," he added. "I expected it." He tapped the steering wheel twice, a rhythm Liam recognized from the motel room. A signal. A habit. He knew it meant the man was thinking, deeply, planning. Liam's chest tightened with fear. Back at the Shoreline Motel, Detective Ellery stood in the parking lot staring at the tire tracks disappearing into the sandy road behind the building. His jaw clenched so hard the muscle twitched visibly. Officers moved around him in frantic waves, measuring, photographing, marking the ground with numbered flags. But all Ellery could hear was his own heartbeat. "Too slow, Mark." He read the words again and again, feeling his stomach twist at the familiar tone. Morales approached carefully. "Detective, you okay?" Ellery didn't answer at first. His eyes were locked on the horizon beyond the motel, the faint shimmer of heat rising from the highway. Finally, he spoke. "He's escalating." Morales nodded. "We need the bolo expanded, statewide." "No," Ellery said. His voice was low, tight. "Not statewide. Regional. Every county from here to Jacksonville gets the alert. We don't even know what direction he went. We know enough." He crouched to examine the tire marks again. Deep grooves, high acceleration. Dirt kicked sharply backward. A vehicle that left quickly and confidently. He didn't flee in panic, Ellery murmured. He fled on schedule. Morales exhaled, frustrated. So what now? Drag the coastline? Check every exit for 50 miles? Ellery finally stood. No, we find his anchor point. Anchor point, Morales repeated. Any predator who keeps a victim for more than a few hours relies on stability, a location, a fallback, a routine. He isn't improvising. He's rehearsed. Morales lowered her voice. And we're behind. Ellery didn't deny it. He simply walked back toward his car, mind racing. Behind him, another officer called out. Detective, you need to see this. Ellery turned sharply, heart skipping. The officer held a folded paper bag, thin, greasy at the bottom, as if it had been carried for a long time. Something rattled inside. We found it in the trash behind the motel, the officer said. Timestamp on the wrapper puts it at around 7:15 a.m. Ellery took the bag and opened it. Inside was a half-eaten chocolate chip cookie. And another small note. He likes these. I remembered. Ellery felt the air leave his lungs. He's feeding him, Morales whispered behind him. No, Ellery said, voice low and furious. He's caring for him. The difference chilled everyone. Because caring meant time, attention, attachment. And attachment meant this would not end quickly. Ellery inhaled slowly, steadying himself. We need everything, he said suddenly. Phone towers, traffic cams, surveillance from gas stations on Highway 41. If he went north, we track him north. If he went south... Morales interrupted, tapping her radio. Detective, Highway Patrol just called in. Ellery turned. What? They spotted a vehicle matching partial description. White sedan, tinted windows. Heading east. East? Ellery snapped. That leads nowhere. That's... His stomach dropped. That's rural territory, marshland, dead zones. Morales nodded. No cameras, no patrol routes, no witnesses. Ellery swore, running for his car. But before he could climb in, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He stared at the screen, and breath halted. Officers around him tensed. He answered slowly. Speak. A soft inhale on the other end. A faint, almost gentle hum of an engine in the background. Then the voice. You came close today. Ellery froze, every vein trembling. But close, the man continued, isn't enough. Ellery's voice cracked like a whip. If you touch that boy... Detective, the man sighed, almost disappointed. You keep talking as if this is about harm. His tone shifted, velvety, calm, horrifying. It's not about hurting him. It's about keeping him. Ellery felt the blood drain from his face. You're sick. No, the man corrected softly. I'm prepared. Prepared. Prepared for what? Ellery forced his voice steady. What do you want? A pause. 3 seconds? 4. Then? Someone didn't care for him. You believe you can. Ellery's skin crawled. But Mark... He whispered the detective's first name, like an intimate secret. You still don't see the truth you're standing on. What truth? Ellery demanded. Another break. Then the man whispered, he wasn't taken. Ellery's breath caught. He was chosen. The line went dead. Miles away, in the sedan, Liam's small voice trembled. Are we going home? The man glanced at him with a near fatherly softness. Yes, he said. We're going exactly where you belong. The highway narrowed into a single strip of cracked asphalt, swallowed by marshland on both sides. Cypress branches draped over the road like skeletal arms, forming a tunnel of shadow that grew darker with every mile. In the back seat, Liam stared out at the landscape. Water, trees, nothing else. No houses, no cars, no people. Just emptiness, stretching forever. His breathing quickened. The man in the blue hat noticed. "Deep breaths," he said softly, as if guiding a frightened animal. "Fear is loud. You must be quiet." Liam wiped his eyes quickly, terrified the man would see him cry. The sedan slowed as it reached a fork in the road, 2 narrow lanes splitting off in opposite directions. No signs, no markers, no indication of where either led. But the man didn't hesitate. He turned left. Liam swallowed hard. Back in town, Detective Ellery stood in the briefing room, surrounded by a dozen officers, maps pinned to the board, red markers tracing roads, highways, rural turns. Morales pointed at a satellite image. "This area here," she said, tapping the dead space east of the motel, "is where Highway Patrol placed the vehicle." "No cameras," another officer added. "No reinforced police presence. A perfect place for someone who wants to disappear." Ellery didn't blink. "Start narrowing by infrastructure." A tech scrolled through a monitor. "Minimal. 2 fishing shacks, 1 bait shop. Power lines cut through, but clusters are inconsistent." Ellery leaned closer. "Inconsistent how?" "Jumps in the grid," the tech explained, "like something's drawing heavy power for short bursts." Morales frowned. "What would need high power draw out there?" The tech hesitated. "A generator, maybe medical equipment, industrial freezers." Ellery's pulse spiked. "Send me coordinates." Outside, he strode toward his car. Morales jogged behind him. "Sir, we don't know what's out there." "We know enough," Ellery fired back. "You're acting like he's giving you clues on purpose." Ellery stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "He is giving me clues on purpose." Morales shook her head. "That makes no sense." Ellery exhaled sharply through his nose. "He's not hiding this boy out of panic. He's staging it. He's constructing the narrative." Morales stared. "And what narrative is that?" Ellery's voice sank to a whisper. "That Liam doesn't belong to anyone else anymore." Morales looked sick. "We have to move now," she said. "But we need a team." "No time for a team," Ellery replied, opening the car door. "Meet me there." Morales cursed under her breath and ran to her own vehicle. Back on the rural road, the sedan finally left the asphalt. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as the car descended a slight hill. The air grew colder. The marshland thickened, swallowing the road behind them. Liam watched the rear window anxiously. Every second, the world he knew faded. The man pulled up to a small clearing. A cabin sat hidden beneath twisted oaks, almost invisible from the road. Wood darkened from age, windows boarded from the outside. A metal pole beside it hummed with electricity. The man killed the engine and turned to Liam. "We're home," he said warmly. Liam whimpered. "I want my mom." The man leaned forward, placing 2 fingers under the boy's chin. "She didn't keep you safe." Liam froze. "I will." The words were soft, gentle, terrifying. The man opened his door and stepped out, moving around to unbuckle Liam with the same care a parent uses to free a sleeping child from a car seat. "Come," he said. "No running. You know what happens if you run." Liam nodded, tears streaking his face as he followed him toward the cabin. Inside, the air was cold, sterile, far too clean. A single cot, a small table, a camera mounted in the corner, and a generator humming beneath the floorboards. The man shut the door behind them. "You've had a long day," he said, taking off his blue hat and hanging it neatly on a hook. "Rest now." Liam sat trembling on the cot. "Please," he whispered to no one. "Help me, please." The man crouched, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Someone is coming," he said softly, "but he isn't coming to rescue you." Liam's eyes widened. The man smiled faintly. "He's coming because I invited him." Miles away, Ellery's car tore down the rural road, the tires spitting mud as he followed the coordinates. His hands gripped the wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned white. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. Ellery answered instantly. "Where is he?" The man's voice drifted through the speaker, smooth as silk. "You're getting close." Ellery's breath hitched. "Don't touch that boy." "You keep repeating that," the man replied, "as if it changes anything." Ellery's voice broke. "Why him? Why Liam?" "Because someone had to care for him," the man answered calmly. "Someone who understands him." Ellery nearly drove off the road. What the hell does that mean? A pause. Then the chilling reply, "It means Mark. He reminds me of you." The call ended. Ellery stared at the phone, breath trembling, heart pounding against his ribs like a fist. What the hell does that mean? But he didn't slow down. He sped faster, straight toward the cabin, straight toward the man, straight into whatever trap waited for him. Ellery's car bounced violently as it tore off the main gravel road and into the narrow dirt trail mapped by the technician's coordinates. Branches scraped the doors. Mud splattered the windshield. The deeper he drove, the quieter everything became. No traffic, no houses, no voices, just the low hum of marsh insects and the distant groan of shifting water. His GPS glitched twice, losing signal, recalculating, then freezing entirely. Morales' SUV followed a minute behind, but Ellery didn't wait for her. He couldn't. The man's final words still clawed at his skull. "He reminds me of you." What did that mean? What connection? What past was being dragged into this? Ellery didn't know, but whatever it was, the man wanted him to think about it, wanted him disoriented, distracted, a trap. And still, he couldn't stop driving into it. He slammed the brakes when something glinted ahead on the dirt path. A strip of reflective tape stretched across the road, tied between two trees. Not professionally placed, but placed intentionally, like a marker. Ellery got out slowly, hand on his holster. He approached the tape. There was something attached to it. A Polaroid. Fresh, edges still warm from developing. He lifted it carefully. His stomach dropped. The photo showed Liam sitting on a cot, eyes red, cheeks streaked with tears, but alive. Behind him, half cropped out of frame, was the man's hand resting lightly on the boy's shoulder. On the bottom of the Polaroid, scrawled in black marker, "Keep going. He's waiting." Ellery's jaw clenched. He ripped the tape down and threw it aside, then jumped back into his car and accelerated, heart pounding so violently he could feel it in his teeth. Ahead, the trees finally thinned, and he saw it, the cabin, small, dark, hidden beneath the canopy of twisted oaks, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. A single pole beside it vibrated faintly with electricity, the power anomaly the tech had spotted. Ellery killed the engine and stepped out. The air felt thick, heavy, charged. He approached slowly, gun drawn, every instinct screaming that nothing about this was right. 180 feet, 120 feet, 60 feet. At 30 feet, he heard it. A sound from inside the cabin, soft, muffled. A whimper. A child's. "Liam," Ellery whispered, voice cracking. He moved faster, stepping onto the small porch, boots creaking on the rotting wood. He tested the doorknob. Unlocked. Of course it was. He pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp. Cold air drifted out, carrying a faint metallic scent. On the cot, a small shape. Ellery's heart seized. "Liam?" He rushed forward and stopped dead. It wasn't Liam. It was a doll, child-sized, wrapped in one of Liam's shirts. A decoy, a message. Behind him, the door slammed shut. Ellery spun, weapon raised. But no one was behind the door. He stepped back, chest heaving. Then he saw it. A small cassette recorder sitting on the table, a red light blinking. Ellery approached it slowly, dread crawling beneath his skin. He pressed play. The man's voice filled the room, calm, measured, almost soothing. "I knew you'd come alone." Ellery swallowed hard. "You always do." Static crackled. "You follow the wounded, Mark. You always have. Even when they weren't yours to save." Ellery's grip tightened on his gun. "You think this boy needs rescuing, but you never asked the right question." A pause. Then softly, "Why did he go with me?" Ellery blinked. "What?" The tape continued. "You assumed I took him, snatched him, forced him." A quiet chuckle. "But I didn't." Ellery whispered, "You're lying." "I didn't take him," the man repeated. "He walked to me." Ellery shook his head violently. "No, no. Liam was... He was... waiting." Ellery's breath hitched. "He was waiting," the man said again. "At the shoreline, walking toward me long before you ever got the call." "No," Ellery whispered. But a sickening detail rose in his memory, something he'd overlooked. When the mother first reported Liam missing, she said, "He was building a sandcastle. I turned for 2 seconds and he was gone." Gone. Not taken. Gone. The tape crackled again. "You're not saving him from me," the man said. "You're saving him from the world that didn't keep him." Ellery felt cold to his bones. "And Mark," the man's voice lowered. "You of all people should understand that." Ellery's heart stopped. Behind him, the floor creaked. Slowly, deliberately, as if someone had stepped inside the cabin. Ellery turned, gun raised, but the room was empty. Another creak, this time above him, the attic. Then a thud, soft, directly overhead, and a small panicked cry. Liam. Ellery's entire body snapped into motion, eyes blazing toward the ceiling hatch. "Liam! I'm coming!" He dragged a chair beneath the hatch, climbed up, and pushed. It didn't budge. He pushed harder, muscles shaking with effort. The hatch was locked from the other side. Then a small voice trembled through the wood. "Help! Please, help!" Ellery slammed his palm against the boards. "I'm here, buddy! I'm right here!" But before he could attempt to force it open, the recorder clicked again, playing a final message he hadn't pressed. The man's voice whispered, "Break the wrong door, and he dies." Ellery froze. Then the voice added, "And Mark, this time, you choose." The recorder clicked off. Silence. The attic creaked again. Then Liam screamed. Liam's scream ripped through the ceiling like a knife, tearing through fabric, sharp enough to freeze Ellery mid-breath. It wasn't loud, it wasn't even long, but it was real. Raw fear, a sound a child only makes when he truly believes no one is coming. Ellery shoved his shoulder against the attic hatch again, once, twice, but the latch held firm, reinforced, modified, built to stall him, not to stop him forever, just long enough. He stepped back, chest heaving, sweat beating down his spine. Think, Mark. He wants you to panic. He wants you to choose the wrong door. He scanned the cabin. Nothing out of place, nothing to break the hatch with. Just the table, the cot, the recorder. Then he saw it. A thin cord along the base of the wall, subtle, nearly invisible. Tripwire, leading to the hatch. His stomach dropped. If he forced it open, it wouldn't just break the door. It would set something off. A trap. And the man knew Ellery would find it, knew he couldn't ignore it. Another thud from above, something shifting rapidly across the attic floorboards. Liam's terrified breathing. "Detective!" the boy cried, voice shaking so hard it cracked. "I'm right here," Ellery said, climbing onto the chair again, pressing his palms to the hatch. "Liam, talk to me. I'm going to get you out." Below the panic, he listened for another sound, a second voice, a man's breath, footsteps, but there was nothing. Just Liam, just the boy, alone, for now. Ellery climbed down again, pacing the room in furious circles, every nerve in his body screaming for action, his instincts torn between kicking the door down and saving the boy safely. He replayed the cassette in his mind. Break the wrong door, and he dies. The phrasing gnawed at him. Wrong door, which implied there was a right one. His eyes scanned the room again, the cot, the walls, the boarded windows, the shadows. Then he saw it, a faint outline, a hairline seam, on the floorboards behind the cot. Another door, but not above, below. He ran to it and dropped to his knees. It was a hatch, hidden, designed to blend perfectly with the wood. A basement, of course. While everyone else would focus on the boy's screams above, he was meant to find this. This was the real path, a choice designed to measure him. Ellery yanked the cot aside and gripped the handle of the hidden hatch. It lifted easily, too easily, as though inviting him in. Cold air billowed out, dark, damp, electric humming pulsing below, and something else, a soft, repeated tapping, not from panic, from routine, from habit, Liam's habit, tapping his fingers when he was scared. Ellery felt his throat tighten. "Liam," he whispered toward the dark opening, "I'm coming down." But before he could descend, the attic shook with another scream, sharper this time, more desperate. Ellery flinched. Two choices, two doors, two versions of the boy. Which one was real? Which one was bait? He forced himself to breathe. The man wanted him to rush toward the scream, run blind, trigger the trap, lose the boy. But the tapping below, that was Liam. That was the detail only someone who had read his psychological file, someone like Ellery, would recognize. Ellery lowered himself into the hatch. The wooden ladder creaked as he descended into the darkness, boots finding soft earth. The basement was cold enough to bite. The walls were lined with unfinished cement, the floor scattered with mud and tools, old spades, a water jug, coils of rope. The hum came from a large generator in the corner. Wires snaked across the room like veins. And at the far end, a small metal cell, padlocked, just large enough for a child. Ellery's chest caved inward. He ran to it. Inside, curled in a ball, knees hugged to his chest, shaking uncontrollably. Liam, alive, truly alive. Small hands tapping the ground in that rhythmic panic, trying to soothe himself but failing each time. "Liam," Ellery breathed, dropping to his knees. Hey, it's me." The boy lifted his head. Tears streaked his dirt-covered face. His lower lip trembled as he whispered, "Detective Ellery, you came." Ellery grabbed the lock, yanking hard, muscles burning. It didn't budge. "Hold on, buddy," he said, voice trembling. "I've got you." Above them, the attic shook again. Another scream, identical to Liam's. Almost too identical. A recording. A lure. A distraction for whoever chose wrong. But Ellery wasn't fooled now. He lowered his forehead to the bars, breathing through the wave of emotion threatening to break him. "You're okay," he said softly. "I've got you now. You're okay." Liam reached out, tiny fingers curling around Ellery's. The boy sobbed. "Hurry!" Ellery stood and scanned the basement for tools. A crowbar, a bolt cutter, anything, nothing. Of course. The man didn't leave mistakes. Ellery looked back at Liam. "I'm going upstairs," he said gently. "I'll find the key. I swear to you, I'm coming back down." Liam shook violently. "No," he cried. "He's still here." Ellery's blood ran cold. "He said you would choose," Liam whispered. "He said you always choose wrong." Ellery knelt again, gripping the cell bars. "Listen to me. I'm getting you out. But you have to trust me." Liam nodded weakly. Ellery stood, ready to turn. The basement lights flickered, once, twice, then went black. The generator cut out. Silence swallowed everything. Ellery froze. No hum, no tapping, no breathing except his own, and Liam's quiet sobbing in the dark. Then a voice filled the basement. Not from above, not from a speaker. From behind him, soft, even, close. "You chose correctly," the man said. "Good." Ellery spun, gun raised, but saw nothing. Just the shape of a man retreating deeper into the shadows, blending with them like smoke. "You found the real boy," the voice continued calmly. "Now let's see if you can keep him." Ellery fired, the shot deafening in the concrete room, but it struck empty wall. The man laughed quietly. "You can't save him alone, Mark," he whispered. "We both know what happened last time you tried to save a child." Ellery's hand shook. "What did you say?" A breath in the dark, close enough to feel. "Ask yourself why this case found you." Footsteps retreated. A door above slammed open. Then the man's voice drifted down one last time. 20 minutes. Then the room fills with water." The hatch slammed shut and locked. Liam gasped. "Detective!" Ellery stepped back, eyes wide, heart pounding with primal horror. He looked at the pipes overhead, looked at the drain in the floor, realized the truth. The timer had already started. The first sound was a hiss. Soft, subtle, almost gentle. Then Ellery heard the rattle of metal shifting in the walls, pipes waking, pressurizing, shuddering like something alive. The boy whimpered. "Detective, what's happening?" Ellery didn't answer at first. He stepped into the center of the room, listening. Another hiss, longer, sharper. Moist air brushed his cheek. Water. The man wasn't bluffing. He was going to flood the basement. Ellery swallowed hard, adrenaline spiking through him, snapping his mind into brutal clarity. "Nobody's dying down here," he said firmly. "You hear me, Liam?" The boy nodded through trembling breaths, his fingers clinging to the metal bars so tightly his knuckles went white. Ellery scanned the room in the dim emergency glow. Pipes ran along the ceiling, down the walls, into the drain system, all sealed, all reinforced. He checked the hatch again, locked, bolted. A steel plate sliding over it from above, controlled remotely. A prison, a drowning chamber. Another hiss. This time water dripped from a seam overhead. One drop, two, a third. Then a thin spray burst outward like a punctured lung. Liam screamed. Ellery grabbed his face between his hands. "Look at me! Look at me!" Tears distorted the boy's vision, but he forced himself to meet the detective's eyes. "I promised you I'd get you out," Ellery said. "I don't break promises." "But," Liam sobbed, "he said nobody finds this place." Ellery stood abruptly. "Yeah? Well, he underestimated me." He turned to the cell, examining the lock again. Solid, heavy, industrial-grade steel, reinforced with an anti-saw core, but not perfect. Every system had a weak point. Water began pooling on the floor, inching outward in a widening circle. Ellery's boots splashed as he paced. "Where's the key? Where is it? Where would the man—" Something glinted near the far corner, a chain hanging from a hook. Ellery lunged toward it, ripping it free. A key was attached. Small, old, but unmistakably a key. His heart leaped. He ran to the cell, but the key didn't fit. Wrong shape, wrong teeth, completely wrong lock, a decoy, a game, a punishment. Liam's breath hitched in terror. He said, "You'd always fall for the first answer." Ellery cursed under his breath, slamming the useless key against the bars until it bent. The water reached his ankles. He spun, searching again. Scanning, calculating. The man wanted him to be angry, wanted him desperate, wanted him sloppy, and Ellery refused. He forced his breathing steady, his vision narrowing to fine detail. The bolts, the hinges, the structural welds. There, the welds. On the lower left corner of the cage door, the weld line was slightly thinner than the others, a different sheen under the sparse emergency light. A human error, a flaw, maybe the only one. "You're getting out," Ellery said, grabbing the corner of the cage with both hands, planting his feet in the rising water. "Back up!" Liam pressed himself into the far wall of the cell. Ellery braced, muscles screaming, and pulled. Nothing. He pulled harder. The weld groaned. The ceiling rained another burst of spray, water cascading down his neck and shoulders. Ellery roared and pulled again, every muscle burning, every tendon straining. The weld cracked, a hairline fracture, barely visible, but there. Liam gasped. "You can do it! Please!" Ellery gritted his teeth and pulled again. Harder, harder! The metal shrieked. The door bent outward by an inch. But behind him, a deep, metallic boom sounded. Another valve opening. Water surged from the rear wall in a violent burst. The water level rose to Ellery's shins in seconds. Liam began to cry uncontrollably. "Hurry! Please!" Ellery repositioned, hands slipping from the wet steel. He wiped his palms on his soaked shirt, took a breath that felt like swallowing knives, and pulled again. The weld ripped another inch, almost. "You can do this, Mark." He muttered it to himself. "You can do this. You didn't save them then, but you save him now. Right now." He didn't hear himself say it, but Liam did. "Didn't save who?" the boy whispered through sobs. Ellery didn't answer. He couldn't. Another burst, more water. The basement floor now covered to his knees. No time. Ellery let out a primal yell, a sound pulled from somewhere buried deep and ancient inside him, and he wrenched the metal outward so violently his shoulder nearly dislocated. The weld split, but the gap was still too narrow for a child to crawl through. "Detective!" "I know!" Ellery shouted. He grabbed the metal edge and bent it sideways like a twisted rib. His muscles felt like they were tearing apart. His fingers bled as metal sliced into them, but the opening widened. 4 inches, 6, 8. Liam crawled forward. "Come on!" Ellery shouted. "Come on, Liam!" The boy squeezed through and became stuck at the hips. "No, no, no!" Liam whimpered. "I can't." "Yes, you can." Ellery pressed against the bars, pushing the metal outward, giving the boy the extra inch he needed. Liam slid free and collapsed into Ellery's arms, sobbing into his chest. Ellery lifted him instantly. "We're not done," he said, cradling the boy with one arm and grabbing the ladder with the other. "We're getting out." But when he climbed to the hatch, it didn't budge, not an inch. Ellery slammed his fist into it. "Open!" Nothing. Water rose behind him, swirling, splashing, now nearly to the second rung of the ladder. Liam clung to Ellery's neck, shaking violently. "We're gonna drown," he whispered. Ellery's heartbeat thundered. "No," he said fiercely. "We're not." He banged on the ceiling again. Open! His voice cracked. His throat tore. Open! Footsteps echoed above. Slow, measured. Then a voice through the wood. You made the right choice, Mark. Ellery froze. The man was standing right above them. And now, he said softly, you get one more. Silence. Then, a click. The sound of something sliding across wood. A timer. 20 minutes. No. Less now. The man added, let's see what kind of father you would have been. The footsteps faded. The hatch stayed locked. Ellery stared upward, skin crawling, heart collapsing into a pit of rage and terror, so deep he thought he might drown in it, even without the rising water. He pulled Liam close. Hold on to me, he whispered. Whatever happens, don't let go. Liam nodded against his shoulder, tiny fingers gripping Ellery's soaked shirt. The water rose to their waist. Ellery scanned the dark room one last time. There had to be a way. There had to be. There had to... His eyes froze on the generator, and realized if he couldn't open the hatch, he'd blow it open. The generator's metal casing gleamed faintly under the pulsing emergency light, droplets of water sliding down its sides. The floor around it was already drenched, water swirling in small spirals as it rose inch by inch. The smell of damp earth and cold steel filled the basement, thick and suffocating. Ellery held Liam tighter against him, pushing the boy up onto the ladder to keep him above the waterline. It's okay, Ellery whispered, though his voice trembled. Stay right here. Don't move. Liam nodded, shivering violently. Ellery splashed back to the generator, his boots dragging through the rising water, now almost to his thighs. He ripped open the control panel. Sparks snapped out like angry fireflies. Please don't, Liam begged from the ladder. You'll get hurt. Ellery didn't look back. Getting hurt wasn't the concern. Running out of time was. He ripped wires free, yanking them until the copper strands stretched and snapped. The generator rattled violently, coughing, chugging, trying to regulate the sudden disruption. He slammed the heel of his palm into the panel. The machine sparked again, harder this time, hissing like a venomous snake. Then a low rumble, a growl building inside its metal belly. A sign the pressure was climbing, a sign it was ready. Ellery looked up at the hatch. The thick steel plate that sealed them in was directly above the ladder. If the blast was controlled, it might blow the mechanism loose. If it wasn't... He shoved aside the thought. He grabbed Liam from the ladder. We're going to hold on to this wall, he said, bracing the boy against him. Cover your ears. Don't look. Detective, Liam sobbed, terrified. I don't want to die. You're not. Ellery said it like a vow, like something sacred, something binding. He pressed his hand over the boy's head, shielding him. The generator rattled harder. The room shook. Panels clanged against each other, forcing out crackling bursts of electricity. The water rose to Ellery's waist. Come on, Ellery breathed. Come on, the machine screamed. A flash of white exploded inside the panel. Boom! The blast slammed Ellery and Liam against the wall, a violent shock wave rattling the entire basement. Dust fell from the ceiling. Water splashed upward in a massive spray. The light died for a full second, pitch black. Then a metallic groan above. The hatch, it shifted. Another groan, like a beast waking. Then the steel plate slid sideways, dislodged by the concussion. Ellery gasped. Liam, go! Go! He shoved the boy toward the ladder. Liam scrambled, gripping each rung with frantic, slippery fingers. Ellery followed right behind him, heart exploding in his chest, lungs burning with adrenaline. The attic recording of Liam's screams, still playing on a looping speaker, warped and stuttered above them, glitching under the shockwave. The real boy reached the top. The hatch, free of its lock, pushed open. Daylight, sweet, shocking daylight, poured into the dark basement, flooding the room with gold. "Go! Go!" Ellery shouted. Liam scrambled out. Ellery followed, dragging himself onto the attic floor, coughing, dripping, light stabbing into his eyes after the suffocating dark. He pulled Liam into his arms. "It's okay," he breathed. "We're out. We're out." But his relief lasted only a second. Footsteps, slow, measured, approaching from the far end of the attic, where shifting beams of dusty sunlight filtered through broken boards. Ellery froze. Liam tightened into him. A shadow appeared first. Tall, calm, aligned in perfect posture, like a man stepping into a sermon. The man in the blue hat did not look frantic, did not look angry. He looked, disappointed. "I thought you might drown," he said softly. "I underestimated you." Ellery rose slowly, placing Liam behind him. "Don't take another step." The man ignored him, tilted his head, studied him almost lovingly. "You saved him," he said. "Finally." Ellery's jaw tightened. "There is nothing finally about this," he spat. "You're done. It's over." The man almost smiled. "Is it?" Ellery raised his weapon. "It is, if you move." The man clasped his hands in front of him, hat brim shadowing his eyes. "You think I want to harm him," he said calmly, "but harm was the world he lived in before me. Neglect, loneliness. A mother who barely noticed his absence for more than a minute." Liam whimpered. "Stop talking," Ellery hissed. "You think I chose him at random, but I chose him because I recognized him." The man stepped closer. "I recognized you." Ellery's throat closed. "Don't," he warned. "You grew up the same," the man whispered, "forgotten in plain sight. The wounded find the wounded." Ellery flinched, not physically, but internally, like the words punctured something he had buried for years. "You're trying to get in my head." "I'm already there." Ellery steadied his hands, despite the tremor. "You're not leaving this attic." The man finally paused, then nodded, almost respectfully. "No," he said. "I don't suppose I will." He reached into his coat slowly. Ellery tensed. Liam cried, but the man only withdrew a folded piece of paper. He held it toward Ellery. "I wrote this long before today," he said, "because I knew it would end like this. With you, not the others. You." Ellery didn't take it. The man placed it on a wooden beam. "Read it when you're ready." Then he did something that froze time. He knelt, hands open, head bowed. A surrender, except it wasn't, because his eyes lifted, not to Ellery, but to Liam. And he smiled. A small, gentle smile that made Liam recoil behind the detective. "You're safe now," the man whispered. Ellery moved fast. He lunged, tackling the man to the ground, ripping his arms behind his back. Zip ties snapped around the man's wrists. The man did not fight. Not once. He exhaled slowly, like a man relieved. "It's done." Ellery dragged him upright. "It was done," Ellery said through clenched teeth. "The second you touched that boy." The man tilted his head again. "You don't understand," he said. "I didn't touch him. I took him away from a life that would have swallowed him whole." Ellery shoved him toward the attic steps. "Shut your mouth!" "As you wish," the man murmured. But as he descended, he said one last thing. "You'll see I was right." Ellery almost shoved him through the floor. Police sirens echoed outside. Dozens of officers stormed toward the cabin. Morales was the first up the stairs. "Ellery," Liam! Liam broke into tears and threw himself at her. She scooped him into her arms, sobbing into his hair. Ellery handed off the man, who walked past the officers calmly, like he was entering a church instead of custody. As they dragged him away, he turned once more toward Ellery. "Read the letter." Then he disappeared down the stairs. Morales hugged the detective briefly. Unexpected. Tight. "You did it," she whispered. "You brought him back." Ellery didn't smile. He just stared at the folded paper left on the wooden beam. Hours later, after Liam was reunited with medical staff and the suspect was in isolation, Ellery sat alone on the back of an ambulance. The letter lay in his hands. He opened it. Handwriting, clean, elegant. "You think I'd take children because I desire them. I don't. I take them because I see their future before they do. The ones like you, the ones who grow up in silence. The world abandoned you, Mark, just like it abandoned him. The difference is, you survived alone. He wouldn't have." Ellery's jaw trembled as he read the final line. "I didn't make Liam choose me. He did." The paper slipped from Ellery's hands. He stared into the trees beyond the flashing lights, and for the first time that day, he let his breath collapse. Let it all break inside him. But one thought rose through the wreckage. Liam was alive. The man was caught. And whatever twisted logic, he believed, it ended here. Ellery stood and walked toward the police transport where the man waited, expression serene behind bulletproof glass. Ellery didn't speak. He didn't have to. The man smiled faintly, a smile that said, "This isn't over." Ellery turned away. Because for him, for Liam, for everyone, it finally was.